Snow had been falling over Portland for 3 hours. Not the soft, romantic kind that children press their faces against windows to watch. This was the brutal kind. The kind that seeps into your shoes and turns your fingers numb and reminds you, without any kindness at all, that the world owes you nothing. It settled over the streets in thick, indifferent silence, covering everything equally. The shining storefronts and the broken gutters, the warm-lit cafes and the bus shelters where people with nowhere to go tried to disappear. Nathan Cole did not notice the snow. He stood on the top floor of Hartwell Dynamics, 38 years old, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, explaining a merger that would move $11 million across 3 continents. The boardroom was all glass and polished steel, the kind of room where numbers were spoken in calm voices and decisions were made that changed lives the decision-makers would never see. Nathan's voice was steady, rehearsed without sounding rehearsed, confident in the particular way that made junior executives write down everything he said and senior ones nod slowly, pretending they had already thought the same thing. He was in the middle of a sentence about acquisition timelines when his phone vibrated against the table. He almost ignored it. He had a policy, no phones during presentations. His assistant knew this. Everyone in the building knew this. But something made him glance down. He didn't know what. He would never be able to explain it. Some instinct quieter than thought, older than reason. The message was from a number he didn't recognize. "Please, I know you said you're done helping me, but my son can't breathe properly. His fever is getting worse, and the hospital won't treat him without payment. I only have $41 left. I'm begging you, don't ignore me this time." Nathan read it once, then again. The room around him, the executives, the projector, the $11 million seemed to go very far away, like a television playing in another room. He stood completely still for 3 full seconds, which in a boardroom full of watching eyes is a very long time. My son can't breathe. 4 words. That was all it took. 4 words to reach through every layer of wealth and professionalism and composed practiced distance that Nathan had spent 20 years building around himself and grab something soft and unguarded at the very center of him. He set the presentation remote down very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have started to shake and you don't want anyone to see. "We'll continue this later," he said quietly, and he walked out. He called the number from the hallway, his back against the cold glass wall, the entire snow-covered city spread out silent below him. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was barely above a whisper, worn thin at the edges the way voices get when someone has been crying for a long time and has run completely out of tears and is now just surviving in the raw, hollow place that comes after weeping, the desperate place, the place where pride no longer exists because something more important is at stake. "Please tell me you're coming," she whispered. Nathan closed his eyes. "I think you sent this to the wrong person," he said gently. "I don't know you." There was a silence that felt like falling from a great height. Then a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, and she said, very quietly, "Oh, God." She began to cry, not performative crying, the helpless, mortified kind that happens when you have finally hit the very bottom of your dignity and something else still goes wrong anyway. The crying of a person who has nothing left to protect. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I thought you were someone else. Please, forget I sent anything. I'm so sorry for bothering you." "What hospital are you at?" No, please, forget it. I'm so embarrassed. "What hospital?"
Her breath hitched sharply, and in the background Nathan heard it. A child coughing. Small, weak, labored. The kind of cough that sounds like it cost something to produce. The kind that doesn't sound like a simple cold. The kind that sounds like a small body using every last bit of its remaining strength just to keep drawing breath. Nathan's jaw tightened. Something locked into place behind his eyes. "What hospital?" he asked a third time, and something in his voice, not hardness, but an absolute, immovable certainty, seemed to reach her through everything. "Mercy Children's Clinic, downtown. What's your name?" A pause, long enough that he thought she might hang up. "Lena. And your son?" "Eli." Her voice cracked on the name, just slightly, the way it does when you say the name of someone you are terrified of losing. One syllable carrying the weight of her entire world. "Lena?" Nathan was already moving toward the elevator, one hand reaching for his car keys. "Stay there. I'm coming."
He drove through the snow with his jaw set and his mind somewhere 25 years in the past. He was 13 years old again, small for his age, burning with fever, lying across the back seat of an old pickup truck that smelled like rust and fast food wrappers, while his mother sat in the front seat and cried as quietly as she could so he wouldn't hear her. His father had left 2 years before, not dramatically, not with a final door-slamming fight, but gradually, and then all at once, and then permanently. His mother cleaned hotel bathrooms, double shifts whenever she could get them, and for 11 months they lived in that truck, parked behind a grocery store whose manager left them alone out of some mixture of pity and not wanting the trouble. One winter night, she had taken him to a pharmacy. She couldn't afford the medicine. Nathan had watched her stand at the counter with the boxes in her hands, doing math in her head that didn't add up no matter how many times she tried it, and then her shoulders dropped and she had started crying, quietly, the way she did everything, trying not to take up too much space in a world that had already made clear she wasn't very welcome in it. An old man standing behind her in line had paid for everything, without being asked, without hesitating. Medicine, food, a motel room for 2 nights so they could sleep somewhere warm for the first time in months. Before he left, the old man had looked at Nathan, not his mother, but Nathan specifically, as if he already knew something about who this boy would one day become, and said, "When life gives you the chance, save someone else too." Nathan had carried those words in his chest for 25 years, through poverty and struggle and every early morning and late night it took to build himself into something the world would take seriously. The old man's face had never fully left him, neither had the feeling, the specific, irreplaceable feeling of being a frightened child in the dark and having a stranger decide that your life mattered. He pressed his foot harder on the accelerator. Tonight, the chance had found him by accident, through a wrong number, through a desperate woman's trembling hands dialing the wrong contact in a moment of complete desperation. She was easy to find. A young woman, maybe 30, sitting in the waiting area of the clinic in an oversized gray hoodie that had been washed so many times it had lost all memory of its original shape. Her dark hair was pulled back carelessly, her eyes were swollen and red, exhausted in a way that goes all the way down to the bone, past tiredness, past exhaustion, into that terrible territory where a person is simply running on love because love is all that's left.
And in her arms, pressed against her chest, with his small head heavy on her shoulder, was a little boy. He couldn't have been older than 4. His face was flushed deep with fever. His lips had a faint bluish tinge at the edges that made Nathan's stomach fall away completely. Every few seconds, his tiny chest rose with visible effort, like breathing had become a task requiring his absolute full concentration, like his whole body was working on nothing else. "Lena?" She looked up,
stared at him for a moment as if she wasn't certain he was real, as if kindness had become something she no longer fully trusted the reality of. "You actually came," she whispered. Nathan knelt down beside the child without another word. Eli's skin was burning. His small fingers curled weakly. His breathing was shallow and fast and wrong in a way that Nathan, even without medical training, understood immediately was serious. "What are they saying?" Nathan asked. "Pneumonia," Lena said, her voice barely holding together. "They won't admit him until I pay the emergency deposit, $600. She looked down at her hands. "I have 41. Nathan stood up and walked to the front desk. He didn't negotiate, he didn't explain himself, he simply paid, completely and immediately, and said, "Please take care of the boy now." 12 minutes later, Eli was in a treatment room with oxygen and a doctor and a warm bed and everything a small sick child needed. Lena stood outside the room window, watching her son through the glass, and she was shaking, not from cold, but from the sudden, overwhelming release of a terror she had been holding alone for so many hours that her body didn't know how to put it down gently. "You don't even know us," she said softly, without turning around. Nathan stood beside her, watching Eli through the window. The little boy's chest was rising and falling more easily now. The bluish tinge was already beginning to fade from his lips. "I know what it feels like," Nathan said quietly, "when nobody comes." He drove her home afterward because she had no car, and because it was nearly midnight, and because the snow was still falling, and the city felt very large and very cold, and she looked like someone who had reached the absolute limit of what one person could carry alone. The apartment building was the kind that gets forgotten about, by landlords, by city inspectors, by the people who decide which neighborhoods get repaired and which ones just get older. Broken stairs, a hallway light that flickered every few seconds like it was losing a fight.
Cold air pushing through the cracks in the window frames as if the building had simply stopped trying to keep the outside out. Inside, the apartment was nearly empty, not minimalist empty. A mattress on the floor, a portable heater in the corner, a child's drawing taped crookedly to the wall, a stack of unopened envelopes near the sink that Nathan recognized immediately by their official red lettering, eviction notices, several of them. Lena saw him notice. She looked at the floor. "I sold most things," she said quietly, "after I lost my job." "What happened?" "She worked at a bookstore. They closed 6 months ago." She paused. "I've been applying everywhere. Nobody's calling back." "And Eli's father?" She gave a small, painful laugh that had no humor in it whatsoever. "He left the same week I told him I was pregnant. I haven't heard from him since." Nathan looked around the apartment again, at the child's crayon drawing on the wall, a house with a sun above it and 2 figures holding hands, at the single set of dishes on the counter, at the careful way she had arranged the little that remained to make it as much as possible like a home. This was not a person who had given up. This was a person who was still fighting with everything she had in a situation that would have broken most people entirely. Still standing, still getting up every morning, still making sure her little boy felt loved inside walls that the world had forgotten. Nathan stayed. He made soup from things he found in the nearly bare kitchen. He went out in the snow and came back with groceries and warm blankets and children's medicine and a bag of clothes he'd bought from the 24-hour store 3 blocks away. When the portable heater gave out at 2 in the morning with a click and a silence that felt very loud, Nathan got down on the floor and tried to fix it himself, a billionaire on his knees on a cold, dirty floor, reading the back of a heater, using a borrowed screwdriver in a forgotten apartment, in a forgotten neighborhood in the falling snow. Lena stood in the kitchen doorway watching him.
No cameras, no assistants, no press release waiting to be written, just a man doing what needed to be done because a small boy needed to be warm and there was nobody else there to make it happen. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Nathan looked up from the floor. "Because someone once did it for me, and I've been waiting ever since for the chance to pass it on." In the weeks following, he kept coming back. Eli recovered slowly, then quickly, then completely, the way small children do, as if their bodies simply decide one morning that enough is enough and it's time to be well again. His laugh came back first, then his running, then his habit of asking questions about everything he saw, rapid fire, one after another, with total confidence that the adults around him had answers. One evening, Nathan noticed a stack of papers spread across the kitchen table. Drawings, detailed, beautiful illustrations, characters with expressive faces, backgrounds full of careful texture and light, the kind of images that tell stories without words. He stood looking at them for a long time. "You drew these?" Lena nodded, almost apologetically. "I always wanted to illustrate children's books. I just never got the chance." A week later, Nathan arranged an interview at a publishing company run by an old friend of his father's. He made no favors. He made no promises. He simply said, "There is someone talented you should meet." The talent would have to do the rest. Lena got the job 2 days after the interview. When she called Nathan to tell him, she was crying again, but this was entirely different crying, the kind that sounds like relief and disbelief and joy, all arriving at once, overwhelming the body's ability to contain them quietly. Nathan was alone in his penthouse office when the call came. He sat there for a long time after she hung up, in the dark and the quiet, smiling to himself in a way he hadn't smiled after any business deal, any merger, any milestone in 20 years of building an empire. Months passed, then seasons, then more. Movie nights, hospital checkups that became routine and then unnecessary. Trips to the park where Eli insisted on feeding every single pigeon individually. Late-night ice cream when Lena had a good day at work and wanted to celebrate. Slow Sunday mornings with cartoons and pancakes and the particular comfortable silence of people who have stopped needing to perform happiness for each other because the real thing is simply there. A rainy evening, Nathan sat on the living room floor building a tower out of wooden blocks with Eli, who was deeply serious about the structural integrity of the project, while Lena stood in the kitchen behind them making dinner. The apartment was warm now. It smelled like food and crayons and something Nathan had no word for, something that felt, he realized slowly, like belonging. Eli placed a block very carefully on top of the tower, studied it, then looked up at Nathan with the sudden, total focus that small children aim at you when they are about to say something they have decided matters. "Da, da." Nathan went completely still. In the kitchen, Lena's spoon stopped moving.
Eli giggled, delighted by whatever he saw in Nathan's face, and said it again, clearer this time, certain, like a declaration. "Dada." Nathan's eyes filled before he could stop them. He sat there on the floor with a 4-year-old looking at him with complete and uncomplicated love, and he felt something move in him that he hadn't known was frozen, something that all the money and the success and the achievement in the world had never touched, because money cannot touch it. Only this can. Only being needed, not for what you have, not for what you've built, but simply for the warm and specific fact of your presence. Only that reaches the part of a person that has always been waiting, quietly and without much hope, to matter to someone. A year later, while sorting through old papers, Lena found a folded note tucked inside Nathan's wallet.
The paper was soft and worn, creased into quarters so many times it had gone white along the folds, as if it had been opened and refolded thousands of times over, decades. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was old, slightly faded. 7 words. When life gives you the chance, save someone else too. She looked at Nathan across the room for a long moment. Her eyes were full. "You've kept this your whole life," she said. "It saved mine," he said simply. She crossed the room slowly. She took his hand and placed it against her own chest, over her heart, and held it there. "No, Nathan," she said softly. "You saved ours." 2 winters later, snow covered Portland again, but this time Nathan was not alone in a glass tower explaining mergers to people who would never remember his name. He was standing in the living room of a small, warm house outside the city, watching Eli tear across the floor in his socks, sliding and laughing, crashing into the sofa and bouncing up again. Lena stood on her toes, hanging the last lights on the Christmas tree, humming something quietly to herself. The windows glowed gold against the white outside. Nathan stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, holding a mug of coffee, watching the two of them, this small and ordinary and extraordinary scene, and felt the particular fullness that comes not from getting everything you wanted, but from receiving something you never thought to want. Something that arrived through a wrong number on a snowy night when a desperate mother pressed send, and the universe, for reasons of its own, made sure it landed exactly where it was supposed to go. Lena looked over at him and smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need a reason. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Nathan looked at Eli, who had now decided the sofa cushions were a mountain that required immediate climbing. "That sometimes," he said quietly, his voice low and full and certain, "the most beautiful things in life begin by accident." Outside, the snow kept falling, gentle now, the forgiving kind.